Mr. Falk, would I be accurate if I described your relationship with Mrs. Cole as totally professional? I object, Your Honor, and I move to strike!
Jim Carrey made the world laugh with wild faces and unforgettable characters, but beneath the spotlight was a secret battle few could see. What if the energy that made him famous was also a mask for a lifelong struggle with despair and pain? At 61, Carrey shared raw truths about his darkest moments, his father's tragedy, his own breaking points, and the emotional toll behind the famous smile. This isn't just the story of a comedian. It's a story of survival and the complexity behind every laugh we've ever heard. Hidden struggles behind the humor. Behind Jim Carrey's explosive energy and elastic comedic persona, a quieter suffering lived in the shadows. In a candid 2025 interview, he revealed that since the 1980s he had endured persistent low-level despair, managed for decades with Prozac. This confession contrasted sharply with the boundless joy audiences saw on screen, exposing a painful truth. The man who made millions laugh was often fighting to stay afloat. The divide between his public image and private struggles was vast. Jim's frenetic enthusiasm and fearless physical comedy masked anxiety, addiction, and emotional exhaustion. He once described himself as a manic-depressive clown, performing happiness while internally unraveling. This unseen turmoil shaped his art in ways few recognized at the time, infusing his performances with a depth born from real anguish. These struggles were rooted in Jim's early life, marked by instability and the trauma of witnessing his father's attempts to take his own life. Those experiences imprinted a lifelong fear of the same darkness taking hold of him. What followed was not a single crisis, but an ongoing journey through depression, substance use, and the crushing pressures of fame. His resilience kept him moving forward, but the cost was profound. Throughout his career, Jim waged an internal battle while delivering some of the most dynamic performances in modern comedy. His relentless drive pushed him creatively, but strained his health and relationships. Even as he broke barriers in film, the emotional toll of maintaining his larger-than-life persona grew heavier. This paradox, joy for the world, pain in private, adds a complex layer to his legacy. Fame and fortune never insulated him. If anything, the spotlight intensified his inner turmoil. Understanding this duality reframes iconic moments from his career, revealing the vulnerability behind the humor. Fans long sensed there was more beneath the surface, but only recently has the fuller picture come into view. His openness about medication, anxiety, and emotional struggle helps dismantle stigma, reminding us that mental health challenges affect even those who appear unstoppable. Jim's honesty offers connection and clarity, inviting empathy for those who hide their pain behind a smile. And this is only the beginning. His hidden battles shaped not just his personal life, but every character and joke he ever created. What follows is a deeper exploration of how hardship forged one of Hollywood's most unforgettable performers, where laughter became both shield and lifeline. Navigating this emotional terrain sheds light on the boy behind the legend, whose childhood set the foundation for a complicated but extraordinary life. The making of a comedic survivor. Jim Carrey's story begins in Newmarket, Ontario, where he was born the youngest of 4 children into a family marked by financial struggle and emotional challenges. His father, Percy, once a jazz saxophonist, had given up music for a modest accounting job paying just $8,000 a year. Meanwhile, his mother, Kathleen, battled chronic illness, often confined to bed, adding layers of responsibility and worry within the household. These early years were a clash of dreams and harsh realities, shaping Jim's awareness of hardship from a fragile age. When Jim was 13, the family's world was upended by the sudden closure of Titan Wheels, where Percy worked as an accountant. Facing repeated rejections from accounting firms across Ontario, Percy took a janitor job cleaning toilets for $4 an hour, a humbling fall from his previous status. The family soon lost their home and spent 2 bitter years living in a cramped yellow Volkswagen camper van parked near Lake Ontario. Nights were freezing, comforts scarce, and children slept in tents beside the van, washing in gas station sinks by day. This period of poverty exposed Jim to severe adversity. He scavenged discarded sandwiches to eat, worked night shifts, cleaning floors alongside his parents, and attended high school, barely able to keep up. The strain of poverty was compounded by Kathleen's worsening health and addiction to painkillers, which added emotional distress. Yet, within these struggles, Jim found an unexpected refuge. Humor and performance became a vital escape from the overwhelming chaos. At school, Jim earned the nickname Rubberface for his talent with expressions and impersonations, but his restless nature often got him in trouble. His comedy was not simply a form of entertainment, but a way to endure bullying, poverty, and the emotional weight of his family's condition. While his peers mocked his worn clothes and homemade jokes, Jim honed his craft, unknowingly laying the groundwork for a career built on laughter, born from pain. Then, as the family was disintegrating, his brothers and sisters scattered, and the father, increasing his depression, rejection, and hardship, made Jim more resilient. He quit school at 16 and took up the full-time responsibility of supporting his family, combining very tiring 12-hour shifts with caregiving duties. Though these demands were overwhelming, he continued to perfect his comic talent, for he realized that laughter was the only thing that kept him living during the dark hours. The family obligation, a heavy load though it was, did not crush Jim's dreams. Rather, it gave him the strength to fight for an escape from poverty. Even when his father was struggling with dark episodes, Jim still did early comedic gigs, convinced that success was possible outside of his current living situation. These memories of hardship and instability were painful ones, yet they had given Jim an insight into suffering that later on was the source of the deep and complex human nature in his performances. Jim, loaded with the stamp of these miseries, held a very weak hope, but at the same time, strong enough to survive and be loved and lost. A joke or an impersonation was the first ushering of light into a hard life. This base evinced the deep contradictions in his way, where comedy was almost a lifeline as much as it was a communication. It was right in this melting pot of hardships that the sprouts of Jim Carrey's unbeatable and vibrant nature were buried. Starting from family problems to lonely artistic moments, Jim very soon discovered that laughter could not only cover pain, but could also be a remedy. His narrative of a boy becoming an adult in a difficult environment is essential for the understanding of the future global comedy idol. The path from personal crisis to public stardom is often nonlinear, as Jim soon discovered. Comedy as survival mechanism. For Jim Carrey, comedy was never just a career choice. It was a lifeline in a world full of uncertainty and struggle. From a young age, he discovered that twisting his face into bizarre expressions and mimicking voices wasn't merely play, but a way to control his surroundings. Hours spent in front of mirrors were exercises in experimentation, crafting a persona that both entertained and provided an emotional shield against hardship. This instinct to use laughter as protection became central to his identity. His first real taste of performing came at 15 when his father drove him to Toronto's Yuck Yucks Comedy Club. Dressed in a bright leisure suit chosen by his mother, Jim's initial act bombed, but rather than discouragement, he received quiet pride from his father, which fueled his desire to keep working. Failure on stage was reframed as training, necessary steps on the path to survival through humor. Jim's comedy offered him a voice when words alone failed to capture his inner turmoil. It provided structure amidst chaos and allowed him to remove himself from the harsh realities at home. School was often a hostile place where bullying targeted his poverty and oddities, but on stage, he held power and control. The laughs he elicited were more than applause. They were proof of viability in a world that often overlooked him. Despite enduring setbacks, multiple failed auditions for Saturday Night Live among them, Jim doubled down on forging his unique comedy style. He rejected mere imitation and began inventing exaggerated characters that revealed his wild imagination and raw authenticity. The fire of rejection shaped his creative evolution, ensuring his humor would be neither safe nor conventional. This innovation set him apart and eventually caught the eyes of industry insiders. Comedy also became a shield against a darker reality simmering within. Jim admitted to moments when pain pushed him toward self-harm, desperate to feel something real. Laughter was armor, a way to hide suffering behind absurdity. His art was tangled with survival instinct, a blend of creativity and desperation that few could appreciate watching from afar. The balance between joy and pain in Jim's comedy gave his performances a layered resonance. The chaotic gestures and wild faces weren't just entertainment. They were manifestations of a deeply complicated emotional experience. This authentic intensity made his characters unforgettable and his style unmistakable. Viewers felt a genuine life force driving his humor. As Jim honed his craft in clubs and small gigs, his relentless energy hid a fragile inner world, shaped equally by hardship and hope. The theater became both a sanctuary and a proving ground, teaching him resilience and honing his ability to captivate audiences. Each stage was a step forward out of poverty and darkness. Integrating humor and trauma, Jim Carrey turned personal pain into a performance art that would eventually captivate millions. His early years as a struggling comedian revealed a profound connection between creativity and survival. This foundation is essential to understand and treating the complex man behind the laughter. This early immersion in comedy set the stage for Jim's meteoric rise, a journey marked by brilliance but shadowed by ongoing personal battles, Hollywood breakthrough and personal cost. Jim Carrey's rise to stardom was as rapid as it was intense, catapulting him from small comedy clubs to national television in a matter of years. By 1990, at just 28 years old, he joined the groundbreaking Fox sketch show In Living Color, where his unparalleled energy and willingness to push boundaries quickly made him a standout. Over 5 seasons, he created more than 120 sketches, shaping a unique comedic identity with characters like Fire Marshal Bill, memorable for its wild antics and unsettling humor. Behind the scenes, however, the physical and emotional demands of his work began to take a toll. Jim's commitment to his craft often meant using his body as a prop, contorting, slapping, and even injuring himself in the name of comedy. He gained and lost 20 pounds repeatedly, endured twisted ankles and constant fatigue, yet refused to slow down. The grueling work schedule, up to 80-hour weeks, forced him to rely on stimulants like Adderall just to stay awake and perform. At the same time, Jim's personal life was unraveling. He married Melissa Woomer in 1987, but as his career skyrocketed, their relationship suffered under the weight of fame and exhaustion. His late nights and struggles with fidelity, including reported affairs, compounded tensions that ultimately led to Melissa filing for divorce in 1995. Court documents revealed a man at odds with himself, balancing the public image of a comedic hero while privately battling the consequences of his lifestyle. The content of In Living Color itself became increasingly controversial, mirroring the chaos in Jim's life. Sketches pushed social boundaries so far that Fox executives scrambled to rein in the show's edgy humor, especially segments like Homeboys, which sparked both massive viewership and public complaints. Jim thrived in this environment of risk and rebellion, mocking race, religion, and politics with irreverence. Yet, the creative conflicts and heightened scrutiny added to the growing stress of sustaining an act that was as demanding emotionally as it was physically. Despite these mounting pressures, 1994 marked a pivotal year in Jim's career with the release of Ace Ventura: Pet Detective. The film, made on a modest budget of $15 million, grossed $72 million domestically and became a cultural phenomenon. Jim's improvisational brilliance, delivering nearly 40% of his lines spontaneously, turned Ace Ventura into a beloved character overnight. The catchphrase, "All righty then," echoed through pop culture, shifting Jim's career from TV eccentric to major box office star seemingly overnight. Throughout professional success, the expectations to deliver were still very much there. With his role in Ace Ventura, Jim, in a way, stepped out of his character and at the same time was very much his character. He gave up his normal life, experienced the filming of Ace, lived in the character's apartment, and even took some very dangerous steps that later would have consequences on his mental health. His improvisations at times would put the whole film crew in confusion, as there would be scenes where the retakes were simply due to his acting being unpredictable. However, nothing could stop the studios that were already prepared to pay millions with their hands wide open, as the envelopes were already stuffed with money. Jim had $350,000 in his pocket just because of playing Ace Ventura, but he soon lost that money, and his financial gain went as far as multi-million-dollar salaries for Dumb and Dumber and the Cable Guy. However, every success attracted more pressure and less stability in the actor's personal life. During the tour meant to promote the film Dumb and Dumber, Jim had a nervous breakdown of the worst kind, during which he was hallucinating and admitting to using hard substances to keep him awake. The Ace Ventura franchise was so successful that the merchandising of its products could be seen everywhere. They even made lunchboxes, which were an indication of his reaching the status of a comedic icon. Nevertheless, the success of these products did not ease the hardships that Jim was going through. He took legal action against Warner Brothers in 1995, claiming that they used his likeness without permission. This was a difficult battle for him, as he had to fight for his right to control his public image, despite having an overpowering celebrity status. Jim Carrey, who, through this explosion of fame, was the epitome of a person who was in the limelight, but at the same time, very vulnerable. His constant and unyielding stamina made the crowds laugh till they went into convulsions, but quite the opposite was happening on his part. He was getting exhausted. The paradox of success and the fight set the stage for the even darker problems that were about to require his attention. As Jim wrestled with fame's pressures, the stakes continued to climb, leading to battles that would consume both his mind and body, peak stardom and mental health battles. Jim Carrey was under a great deal of stress, which was one of the main factors that contributed to his mental health issues. He was, however, able to come through all this and stand at the top of the mountain from where he could see the world through the prism of his internal struggles. His portrayal of characters in films like Dumb and Dumber, The Cable Guy, and Batman Forever did not portray the real person behind the camera. He used the euphoric and at times exaggerated public persona to cover up his unsteady and at times very private life, which included not only the dependency on certain substances, but also his openness about being in therapy and taking substances like Valium and Adderall to keep the required level of the physical and emotional demands of his career. His work and the way he lived his life put a strain on his body as well. During the making of the film, he had to go through long makeup sessions for the roles of The Mask and the Grinch. Sometimes he had to sit for as long as 2.5 hours daily, with the burning and non-stop pain resulting from the intense prosthetics on his face. He got injuries such as a broken ankle and a twisted leg, which were just a few of the signs that he was really committed to doing stunts and pushing his body beyond its limit. He was, however, stubborn and would keep asking for new shots until he had the perfect take, which often left him more tired than he already was. The stress also fractured Jim's personal relationships. His marriage to actress Lauren Holly ended after just 1 year, citing his emotional disconnect as a primary cause. Behind the scenes, Jim's struggles sometimes manifested in erratic behavior. Reports surfaced of on-set conflicts, including battles with fellow actors like Tommy Lee Jones over Jim's unpredictable mood swings. The pressures reached a breaking point during promotional tours, where Jim admitted to experiencing hallucinations and extreme paranoia. Behind the charismatic facade was a man feeling increasingly trapped by the need to constantly perform and please others. He described himself as wearing multiple masks, including one completely separate from his famous green-faced character. This metaphor illustrated a deeper psychological pain, where pretending to be happy became a survival strategy as he was coming apart inside. His work during this period reflected the intensity and complexity of his mental state. On The Cable Guy, Jim fully immersed himself in the dark and unsettling character of Chip Douglas, reportedly tormenting co-stars off-camera and creating a tense environment. The film's reception was mixed, highlighting Jim's willingness to take creative risks despite personal costs. The heavy toll of Stardom also included legal and financial battles. Jim's lawsuit against Warner Brothers for unauthorized image use and royalty disputes underscored the challenges of maintaining control over his career. Despite major successes, the battle over contracts and rights brought additional stress and public scrutiny. This combination of professional conflict and personal instability painted a complex picture of life at the top. Publicly, Jim sometimes appeared overwhelmed, culminating in moments like his collapse at the MTV Awards, where he whispered needing a break amid cheers. Backstage admissions revealed a stark contrast between appearance and reality. He was exhausted, paranoid, and deeply aware that he could not keep up the facade much longer. The complexities of fame, addiction, and emotional suffering now shaped not only his life, but the legacy he was creating, profoundly influencing the choices he would make in the years ahead. Career, reinvention, and darker roles. As Jim Carrey's immense popularity grew, he began seeking new ways to challenge himself beyond the manic slapstick that made him famous. This shift led him toward darker, more complex roles that required intense emotional commitment and a willingness to strip away the comedy mask. Films like The Truman Show and Man on the Moon marked a turning point, revealing layers of depth and vulnerability that surprised audiences and critics alike. In these performances, Jim demanded more than just laughs. He sought to explore the human condition in all its contradictions. The making of The Truman Show pushed Jim to physical and psychological extremes. The infamous storm scene took 150 takes in a massive water tank with an artificial storm system so realistic it nearly drowned him. He was driven to feel completely isolated and cut off, refusing to leave the dome set and barely speaking to anyone off camera. This relentless method of acting created authentic emotional moments, but also exacerbated tension with director Peter Weir and the crew. Jim even negotiated for a $20 million bonus contingent on winning a Golden Globe, a testament to his growing assertiveness in controlling his work. Man on the Moon demanded even deeper transformation. Jim lost 40 pounds to embody Andy Kaufman, studying hours of footage to inhabit the eccentric performer's psyche fully. He stayed in character off-set, adopting Kaufman's mannerisms in daily life, a commitment that overwhelmed co-stars like Danny DeVito. In one scene, he injected saline to simulate the pain of cancer, refusing to separate his body from his role. The film earned Jim his second Golden Globe, but at a steep personal cost. Critics later noted that his immersion bordered on self-destruction. Although these serious parts brought out Jim's dramatic skills, the impact on his mental health became more and more obvious. During the shooting of Batman Forever, where he was the Riddler, Jim created 20 different canes and did a very lively and energetic performance that was the favorite of the audience. However, he was constantly anxious and dependent on Valium, which led to frequent conflicts with co-star Tommy Lee Jones. The disorder and chaos Jim was depicting on the screen were parallel to his mounting internal and substance addiction conflicts, which were gradually revealing themselves more openly. In 1998, the movie Liar Liar was a mixture of Jim's comedy roots and his personal drama. His improvisation gave color and made the courtroom scenes unforgettable. Yet the disputes casting over bonuses and the film were an indication of fractures in his business relationships. Just a few years later, the cable guy is going to darker places, both on-screen and off. Jim's portrayal of the obsessive and unhinged character Chip Douglas caused tension in the relationships of the actors on the set and made it quite hard for his fellow actors. The Grinch's victory in 2000 gave rise to challenges that nobody expected. He had to bear the brunt of the daily makeup sessions, which lasted for about 2.5 hours, and left him with a burned-out body and soul. The film that had cost $345 million worldwide also won an Oscar for makeup, but Jim became worn out physically and spiritually. He kept on pushing and insisting on perfection, which very often showed up in his work as a dedication, but at the same time cost him his health. The long-lasting intensity of his work during these years made the situation worse for G, who was struggling with addiction and mental health issues. He was publicly criticized and had to deal with the changing nature of his relationships while trying to meet the demands of fame and, at the same time, take care of his healing. However, through it all, Jim's commitment to advancing as an artist never waned. Instead, it was a source of strength that produced performances which were both courageous and sensitive. As Jim confronted these struggles, a path toward openness and healing slowly began to emerge. Public revelations and healing journey. In recent years, Jim Carrey has embraced transparency as a path to healing. openly discussing lifelong struggles with depression and substance use in ways he once avoided. He has spoken candidly about taking Prozac since the 1980s, living with persistent low-level despair, and eventually quitting medication to experience his emotions without numbness. This shift toward vulnerability has helped break mental health stigmas and encouraged deeper conversations about wellness within Hollywood. Jim's revelations also highlight his long battle with identity. In a 2017 viral interview, he declared, "There is no me," signaling a philosophical shift shaped by years of meditation and spiritual exploration. Embracing surrender rather than ego, he turned to painting as a new creative outlet, producing hundreds of canvases inspired by what he calls Christ consciousness, centering on forgiveness, unity, and compassion. His healing journey required facing painful personal events as well. The 2015 overdose of former partner Catriona White and the subsequent lawsuit alleging emotional abuse cast a heavy shadow over his public image. Though the case was eventually dismissed, it left a lasting emotional weight. Despite this, Jim continued advocating empathy, notably through work with Homeboy Industries, where he emphasized compassion as a form of liberation. Family has played a major role in Jim's emotional evolution. His daughter Jane's autism diagnosis and their periods of estrangement posed deep challenges, while his father Percy's death in 2006 marked a symbolic moment of closure. Jim honored him with a $10 million check for the funeral, an emotional full circle from their years of poverty to a final act of dignity. Professionally, Jim's later roles reflect this transformed outlook. Though he hinted at retirement in 2018, he returned for Sonic the Hedgehog, drawn back in part by the playfulness of the project, highlighted by a script printed in real 24-karat gold ink. This balance of whimsy and depth mirrors his search for meaningful yet joyful work. Jim has been equally open about the importance of therapy and emotional honesty. After nearly dying from pneumonia in 2017, he reassessed his relationship with medication and reaffirmed his preference for feeling emotions fully. His willingness to confront past obsessions, such as the numerological fixation sparked by the number 23, and his principled silence on Kick-Ass 2 after the Sandy Hook tragedy, further demonstrate his evolving social and personal awareness. Through this openness, audiences see not just a comedic genius, but a human being navigating pain, growth, and redemption. A story that inspires resilience and compassion. Through revelation and reflection, Jim Carrey's healing journey redefines what it means to face darkness and emerge with renewed purpose, reminding us that even the brightest lights need space to heal. Legacy beyond laughter. Jim Carrey's legacy reaches far beyond his billion-dollar box office success and iconic characters. Beneath the fame is a man who has long wrestled with loneliness, depression, and the search for meaning beyond applause. His journey reveals not just a brilliant performer, but a thoughtful, evolving individual shaped by both triumph and turmoil. Though he won 2 Golden Globes, Jim never earned an Oscar, yet his influence on comedy may be the greater prize. His wild physicality, fearless improvisation, and emotional vulnerability reshaped the genre, leaving a blueprint for generations of performers. His work resonates not only because it's funny, but because it carries the weight of someone who knows suffering intimately. The juxtaposition of Carrey's public humor and private struggles only to a deeper appreciation of his art. The comprehension of his hardships, lifelong depression, addiction, and heavy personal losses places his performances in a new, compassionate light. His frankness concerning therapy and mental health has played a huge role in stigma dissolution, which in turn has empowered other people to seek help without feeling ashamed. Jim has regularly taken stock of the hollowness that accompanies fame by declaring, "Everyone should go through the experience of being rich and famous, just to find out that nothing has changed." This way of viewing things drew him closer to spirituality, meditation, and the quest for a peaceful existence, independent of the success associated with material things. The effects of his personal journey have been felt in the family area as well, like dealing with poverty, mending past wounds, and being there for his daughter Jane, with respect to her autism. He was discreetly suggesting retirement, but at the same time, he still managed to be part of the movie industry with his roles in Sonic the Hedgehog, which served to confirm his relevance and express his enjoyment of the art. In the end, the legacy of Jim Carrey is that of the artist, a man full of love, and a reminder that the darkest spots are always present, even if one is a comedian. Especially if one is a comedian. Jim Carrey's journey shows that even the brightest smiles can hide battles we may never see, and that real strength often emerges through honest vulnerability. His life reveals how humor and hardship can intertwine, shaping a deeper, more resilient self. If this story opened your eyes, please like and subscribe for more explorations into the lives behind the legends. And don't forget to watch the next video waiting for you on the screen.